was something they did to many of their captives, which actually presented a problem for him because they were very strict back in those days about the liturgical law that you had to have fingers to celebrate Mass. And so he requested a special dispensation from the Pope to say Mass without his fingers. And the Pope, of course, gave it to him with this wonderful line. He said, "One who has shed his blood for Christ should not be denied the blood of Christ at the altar." I love that. Anyway, he went back to the Hurons, was captured a second time by the Iroquois, and was tortured and killed. Interestingly, they didn't get any Huron converts until after he came back the second time, and they all started converting to Mass. Blessed Miguel Pro was martyred in Mexico in 1927 during the Zapatero regime, which was very anti-Catholic. Most people don't know this. He was also an underground priest going from house to house to say Mass. That's an actual picture of his martyrdom. One of the stupidest moves ever of a totalitarian regime. They took pictures of his martyrdom and published them in the paper the next day. There he is with his arms in the form of the cross as he's being shot. He yelled out, "Viva Cristo Rey." They published him in the papers. There were like 300,000 people at his funeral. Yeah, he's a great guy. Blessed Rupert Meyer, the Apostle of Munich, could have been canonized for at least 3 different reasons. He was a very heroic army chaplain during World War I, often going out into the no man's land, into trenches, in between the trenches to give people last rites and give them spiritual comfort. He lost a leg when he was hit on one of those occasions. Then between the wars, he had this heroic ministry really in the city of Munich as all the immigrants were coming in from the countryside, and there was a lot of turmoil and strife in the city between the fascists and the communists. And he would go and he would organize support groups for these people so they wouldn't leave the church to help the immigrants. All these they had such a difficult time. And he would also go to the public meetings to present the thinking of the church. He's most famous for going to a meeting at the Hofbrauhaus where Adolf Hitler was preaching National Socialism, and he told Hitler that no Catholic could be a member of the National Socialist Party. Obviously, this did not endear him to the Nazis. That's his arrest photo. But he was so famous and loved that they didn't want him to die in the concentration camps. He ended up dying right after the end of the war. He was very weakened by his time in the camps. 2 American Jesuits. The reason I mention these 2 is because their statues are in the Capitol, the U.S. Capitol. Padre Eusebio Kino was a missionary and explorer in southwestern America and paired Jacques Marquette, the upper Midwestern Plains. So, you know, each state has a statue of someone. So Kino is from Arizona and Marquette is from Wisconsin. Avery Cardinal Dulles, he's a real American. Those other 2 are from elsewhere. Avery Cardinal Dulles, my teacher at Fordham, was probably one of the greatest American theologians of the 20th century. And the reason I bring him up is because it lets me talk about an article he wrote, which is on your bibliography, not too long before he died. 10 Shining Features of the Society of Jesus. And here we have, again, things that I think that everyone get out of the spiritual exercise. So dedication to the glory of God. It's a Jesuit motto. I orm Dei glory, for the greater glory of God. You'll often see that in MTG, in Jesuit places, and in Jesuit works, and so forth. A personal love for Jesus Christ and a desire to be counted among his close companions. That's what the name of our order is, the Society of Jesus. In the original Spanish, it was Compañía, and company of Jesus, to really be his companions, to labor with, in, and for the church, thinking at all times with the church in obedience to its pastors, availability, willingness to do anything that's required for the gospel, mutual union, preference for spiritual and priestly ministries, on the philosophy that spiritual things are really important and need to be done. Discernment, we'll talk just a little bit about that. Adaptability, so adapting to the situation, what's needed. You can do it. There are great stories about that, and the lives of Jesuits like Matteo Ricci, who went as a missionary to China and adapting to the life of the court in Beijing. and stories like that. Even Xavier, when he was in Japan, realized that he had to adapt to the culture there. Respect for human and natural capacities, that's a big part even of the prayer of the exercises. We'll talk a little bit about this. And an original synthesis of the active and contemplative life. Contemplation and action, which we've already talked about. I meant to print out copies of this article, I completely forgot, but it's on your bibliography and you can get it through ProPlus. So finally, the spiritual exercises. So the spiritual exercises is a book. It's available in many different editions. I put some of them on your bibliography. This is the one I always like. It's a very fine translation. It has a preface by Avery Dulles. It's not meant to be read. You don't improve your spiritual life too much by reading this any more than you get in shape by watching an exercise video. It's meant to be done. And so for that reason, it's actually very boring reading. And it's really meant for the directors of the retreat more than the retreat tents, the people doing the retreat. In fact, many directors don't even give their people a copy of it. They just simply tell them what they need to know from it. But I will pass it around. Spiritual exercises is, what does it mean? This is how Ignatius describes it. By the term spiritual exercises is meant every method of examination of conscience, of meditation, of contemplation, of vocal and mental prayer, and of other spiritual activities which will be mentioned later. For just as taking a walk, journeying on foot, and running are bodily exercises, so we call spiritual exercises every way of preparing and disposing the soul to rid itself of all inordinate attachments, and after their removal, of seeking and finding the will of God in the disposition of our life for the salvation of our soul. Okay? So there's lots of important things in there. Basically, spiritual exercises can be all kinds of different things. Basically, anything that is directed toward ridding ourselves of all inordinate attachments, seeking and finding the will of God. And that's really at the heart of what the exercises try and do for people. In their full form, the spiritual exercises are a 30-day retreat. A 30-day silent retreat called the Long Retreat. Jesuits do this twice in their life. So at the beginning and then in a later stage of formation after their ordination to the priesthood. I guess I didn't really say this too clearly beforehand, but although the spiritual exercises are a big part of the Jesuit life, it is by no means restricted to Jesuits. There are many other religious communities that base their spirituality, both men and women, that base their spirituality on the spiritual exercises. Diocesan priests are often formed and trained in the spiritual exercises as a way of supporting their way of life. So, for example, I have done the 30-day retreat. I directed that for the seminary in Denver. All of their seminarians do a 30-day retreat. I have directed 8-day retreats, a shorter version of it, for the North American College in Rome, the seminarians there. There is a summer program at Creighton University called the Institute for Priestly Formation that hundreds of seminarians every summer come at to receive a crash course in the summer in Ignatian spirituality that includes an 8-day retreat as a way of supporting their lives. And many, many lay people do versions of the spiritual exercises. There is, and the reason for this is because it's a type of spirituality that is good for the active life. And the people that you'll often find not doing the spiritual exercises are monks and true contemplatives who have a different way of praying that's suited to their way of life. But they're very adaptable. So the full form is this 30-day retreat, but there are other ways of doing it. You can do what's called a 19th annotation retreat, which is to do it in the course of daily life over a period of many months. And then there are short forms, 8-day retreats, 3-day retreats, talks, and presentations. What I'm doing tonight is actually kind of a form of the spiritual exercises. It's a great book by the father of a Jesuit, Paul Mariani. His son's name is Paul Mariani, too. Paul Mariani, the elder, is a professor of English at Boston College, a scholar of Gerard Manley Hopkins, who is a Jesuit poet. Anyway, he did the 30-day retreat and wrote a book about it, which is quite wonderful, his experience of it as a layman. So I'll pass that around. His son, by the way, got his doctorate in Chinese history from the University of Chicago and just published his dissertation about the persecution of the church in Shanghai, which included a lot of Jesuits in the 1950s. Good reading. Okay, so the spiritual exercises have as their purpose the conquest of self and the regulation of one's life in such a way that no decision is made under the influence of any inordinate attachment. Okay? So, you notice here a stress on decision. The conquest of self and the regulation of one's life in order to make a decision without the influence of any inordinate attachment. It's often said that the exercises have two goals. That they're to be a time of election. Here, election in a technical sense, meaning to make a decision, usually a very important key life decision about vocation or a job or something like that. But it's also, the spiritual exercises also have as their purposes communion and companionship with Christ. Now there is a little bit of a dispute about whether one or the other of these is more important. I think the answer is both of them are pretty important. It is possible to do the spiritual exercises to make a decision. It's also possible to do them solely to grow in communion and companionship with Christ. Their structure is 4 weeks, 30 days, although the weeks are not even, it's more of a designation of a period than a length of time. But it progresses in this way. The first week is sin. And this is really where one looks at sin in one's personal life and the effects of sin in one's personal life and in the world in order to do what we talk about. Rid oneself of inordinate attachments. Attachment to sin and anything else that keeps us from God. The second week, which can last much longer than a single week, is on the life of Christ. The third week on his passion and death. And the fourth week on the risen life of Christ. As you can see, very focused on Christ and communion and companionship with him. Let's get through that. The first thing that's presented in the spiritual exercises is the examen of conscience. And St. Ignatius thought that in terms of adapting to the spiritual exercises to different groups of people and different types of people, this was one thing that everyone would profit from. So I'm going to hand out, you can take one of these little flyers, pamphlets that speaks about this. The examen of conscience is a spiritual practice, certainly not particular to the spiritual exercises, but Ignatius thought it was absolutely essential to, at the end of the day, go over one's life and to review one's life, find the presence of God in one's life, find one's sinfulness, and through this way become closer to God, discern his will, grow in holiness, and make resolutions and improvement and progress in one's life. And so the exam of conscience is something to do at the end of the day, not necessarily right before bed, but at, when the day is kind of finished, in 5 steps. And I think you'll find that there might be a slightly different expression of it in what you have there, but this is my expression of it. First is to give thanks to God for graces received in the course of the day and in your entire life. Next, to ask for the help of the Holy Spirit to see our lives well. The third, to examine one's day, searching for God's action in our sinfulness. The fourth, to ask forgiveness for our faults, for our sins. And in the fifth place, to resolve to amend our lives and respond faithfully to God's grace. A little spiritual exercise. It might take 10 minutes at the end of the day, but bears enormous fruit for progress of our life in the spiritual life. Now, At this point, I want to just do a little excursus and talk to you about the apostleship of prayer.